get outside. Get off of your computer, get up away from your desk, go out there, meet live people, go to events. Doesn't have to even be professional networking events. It could just be like things that you enjoy doing. Just get out there with people, like be a people person. Even if you don't self-identify as an extrovert or a people person, there's just so much value in connecting with people. And of course, having your wants and your desires live in language. You never know where a connection's going to come from.
Welcome, Joanne Weaver, to the JobQuest Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. It's so nice to be here.
It's great to have you. I'm Ryan, and this is the JobQuest Podcast, where we think about the job search as a hero's journey. The job seeker is a hero on this heroic quest to find their job and their career path. Now, on that path, they've got to fight dragons, as every hero does, and they also, they have ups and downs, but they also have helpers that help them along the way. So JobQuest we use AI tools to help job seekers with resumes and cover letters, things like that. But on this podcast, we're also speaking to people who help job seekers, career coaches. We're talking to successful job seekers themselves, and we're also talking to recruiters like yourself. You're actually the first recruiter that we've spoken to on the JobQuest podcast. So I'm excited to learn a lot about you and what you do. But to just get things started, can you tell us about your own career journey?
Sure. And I love that we're starting with this question, because as I was walking to the studio, this is on 39th Street in New York, I was like, wow, this is such a full circle moment, because I was waitressing when I first moved to New York in 2001, 2002. I was waitressing at a place like 2 blocks down on 39th Street. And I met these two women that were regulars and just chatted with them and got to be friendly with them. And they owned a recruiting agency. And at the time, I was waitressing at that place. I was also cocktail waitressing at the Blue Note. I had been pre-med in college, and I was in a sorority. So I kind of recruited through that. Like, I was always a connector of people, and I enjoyed that. And then when I graduated from school, I went to London for a kind of work abroad situation and ended up at a domestic recruitment company. So they were placing nannies and butlers and gardeners and kind of like everything for the rich and famous. And so I was working there and started making like nanny placements over there. So I had some experience doing it, but I didn't think of it as a career. But then when I met these women at Windfall, which is the restaurant, which is now closed, and they were like, we're looking for a new recruiter. And I was like, I used to recruit in London. Kind of wistfully, like, that was really fun. And they're like, oh, yeah? Really? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, you should interview. And I was like, I would love that. And so that was 2003 when I started working with them. That was at Gainer Staffing. And I just learned everything about the business. I learned about meeting clients, meeting candidates, how to screen people effectively on both sides of the equation. And then it wasn't until I was working at Razorfish, so I quit that job. This is 2006. I worked at Razorfish as their national UX sourcer. And so UX is the field that I'm in now, which is UX design, which is kind of like the functional, kind of practical side of design. And so I was working for Razorfish. It was a big name. I was building my name, and then they laid me off. And then it was just one of those moments where they're like, okay, now what? And this plucky Texan woman that I worked with was like, hey, like, we know how to do this. Like, let's just be recruiters on our own. I'll get the clients and you can place the candidates and we'll just do that. And so that's how I got started. And
wow.
So that was kind of the beginning of the Joanne Weaver Group in 2007.
That's so cool that we're full circle and 2 blocks away from where you started.
I know. So cool.
So you've got a lot of experience in this field, from working for other people's agencies to figuring out how to start your own agency. And, good for you to take that leap and to get this business started. That's really great.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I have a question, which I'm guessing other people do too, which is about recruiting. I hear recruiting and I think of, an Army recruiter, right? Like we want you to join the U.S. Army, but I think a job recruiter is probably a little bit different. But so I think people, job seekers, maybe even business owners, have like maybe an idea of what a recruiter does. But what actually is a recruiter? What does a recruiter do?
Yeah, great question. Let's start with brass tacks.
Okay.
So a recruiter is somebody who is a go-between. So they're basically the conduit between a company who's hiring, which we call a client in the biz, and then the candidate, that's what we call a job seeker in the biz. So somebody who's looking for a job, somebody who has a job, we're the intermediaries that match the person up with the job. There's different types of recruiters. There's internal recruiters, which might be working at a single brand. So let's just say, Duolingo. So there might be a recruiter, multiple recruiters that work at Duolingo that might be looking for people to join their company in certain disciplines. So maybe they might have somebody who's doing like design recruiting mostly. There might be somebody who's doing a whole slew of different disciplines, but they're looking for people for their brand. Like when I was working for Razorfish, I was looking for people to work at Razorfish. What I've done, like what they call it, an outside recruiter or a third-party recruiter, which is what I do, is somebody who either works in an agency or they're independent like I am. So basically the Joanne Weaver Group, my company, is me and my business partner, Rebecca Levy. We basically work with multiple clients, multiple companies. So we might have, a Fortune 100 in the insurance business. That's who we're working with now. We might have some startups. We might have some like agencies or design firm clients. So it's whatever they're looking for at a particular moment in time, we go out in the market, find the right candidates for the job. Sometimes these are people that we've known. Oftentimes it is, or it's people that know people. Like I think 90% of our placements come from people that we've, sourced from people that we know. So it's like a very big word of mouth thing. And I definitely want to talk about that a lot today.
Yeah.
The advantage, there's not a disadvantage of working with an internal recruiter, but the advantage, I think a nice perk of working with an outside recruiter is that you get access to many jobs and many different companies. Maybe not all at the same time, depending on what the market is bearing. But if I meet somebody, like I'm just thinking of a candidate that I met who was working at Shopify and she had education in her background. She was a teacher. And I was like, okay, I work with a couple ed tech companies. I might not have an open role there now, but I could pitch her to them. Like, hey, I don't know if you guys are looking for anybody right now, but I met this really great person. Like, here's like a couple bullet points. Or I might just keep her in mind for the future, right? Like I think my job is very much about the long-term connection, building that relationship with candidates, which is a two-way street. So it's the candidates keeping in touch with me as well. And just, looking for opportunities for them through their careers, really.
And in terms of your business model, the clients are paying you to find candidates. The candidates are not paying you, or
Exactly.
is it both, or it's coming from the clients?
Exactly.
Your business relationship is more with the business itself.
Yes. But I will say for the candidate, the job seeker, it's like the best deal in town because you're basically getting this free service of like, hey.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So when we place a candidate in a role, we'll make a percentage of their salary usually, and then there's they have to stay a certain amount of time, but it's the client who pays us. So whether it's like full time or freelance or temp to perm, they're paying a percentage on top. But it doesn't come out of the candidate's salary. So I think some candidates are like, oh, am I going to suffer in my salary if I work with you? It's like, no, quite the opposite. We're the ones that are going to bat for you at the negotiating table to make sure that we can get as much as we can for you and whatever the client can bear and what feels fair. Like we're working with both sides of the equation to get to a good place.
So because this is such an exciting and amazing situation for a job seeker, I'd imagine that makes your funnel massive in terms of like so many people are going to want to work with you. So I would imagine you'd have to have some really, careful filtering processes to figure out who actually gets down, because you've got a limited amount of time and attention, and you want to have good relationships with clients and place good candidates with them. So what does that process of actually selecting candidates look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we get a job in from a client, the first thing that Rebecca and I do is we sit down and we say, what is the persona of this person? Like, where is this person probably coming from? We'll make a list of target companies. For instance, working with this large insurance company, it's like we're looking for people that have insurance experience or fintech experience. Could be agency side where they had fintech or insurtech clients long term, or they maybe are coming out of like another large corporation that focuses in insurance and financial services, right? But this could be applied to anything. If a startup is looking for somebody, we're probably going to be looking for somebody with a startup experience because they're going to know what it means to, kind of bob and weave with the startup life. So we'll make a list of what our target person is. We'll work with we have a research team that goes out onto LinkedIn and finds people that could be a fit. So we'll hit the people that we know first. We have a database that we've accrued over our 18 years in business this year. We have about 20,000 candidates of people that we've met through the years. We have a really great filtering system. So we first try to go to the people that we know, right? Especially people that we've like maybe placed in the past, people that we've repped in the past, like people that we have a good sense of who they are, and we know that they would probably be a good match.
Yeah.
Then the second line of inquiry would be like asking those people that are in the right domain, like, in this example, like asking people that are coming out of really big insurance companies, like, who do you know? We'll also offer a referral bonus to kind of sweeten the pot a little bit. So if we place their person long-term, they can make up to $1,000, just like a little, kind of motivating factor. Mm-hmm. And then once we get the word out, we'll also post on, on LinkedIn, we'll send out a newsletter, whoever we're talking to for a different role, we'll always ask them for referrals. So it's always just asking, which I think is also a great skill for the job seeker to have too, is that every conversation that you have, it's an opportunity to ask for, hey, do you know somebody at this company? Or I saw that you were LinkedIn with this person, like, could I get a warm intro? So we'll go into networking more in depth later, but these are skills that I think are just really transferable across the board. And then we'll set up phone screens, 30 to 40 minute phone screens with people that we think could be a good match. We'll do a really in-depth interview with them. I'll take furious notes, and then we'll send them to the client. And then we're basically kind of that go-between between the client and the candidate, right? So the client will weigh in, what's your feedback, what's next steps, and then we'll basically be the kind of massagers of the whole process as the candidate moves through the process. So we're giving them like really, really detailed interview preps for each round of the process. Like, here's the company, here's who you're meeting. This is their email for the thank you. Always write a thank you. That's really big. Might be a little old school, but these old school things, they really work. Mm-hmm. And then all the way through to the final negotiation of the offer. Once the person's placed in the role, we'll keep in touch with both sides, make sure it's a good fit, make sure everybody's happy, and that's basically the life cycle.
When does it make sense for, if I'm a client who needs to fill a role, when is it a good time for me to reach out to a recruiter like yourself? And conversely, if I'm a job seeker, when is the right time to come and work with Joanne Weaver Group?
So let me just back up for a second too, and just say the types of people that we represent. Mm-hmm. I think our conversation is much more general than this, but just in terms of the people that we talk to are people that do UX and product design. So again, it's like the functional part of design, not the marketing part of design so much, a little bit of that.
Okay.
User research, content design. So those all kind of roll up into design and UX design and product management, as well as some software engineering. We actually got into that in the last couple of years, which I never thought we'd do, but we did successfully. So that was great. When people in those realms, when they're ready to make a switch, so I'll talk about the candidate side first. So when a candidate is ready to make a move, or even just kind of thinking about making a move, we always like to accept, resumes, portfolios, if that's applicable. We always like to hear people and connect with people. We don't always have time to talk to people that we don't have an open role for. In fact, we rarely do. But just to make that connection, so we can put you in our database, we can look for something. You never know. Like, sometimes I'll get a resume of somebody who's got this very specific background, and then I'll get a call from a client who's looking for that very specific background. So it's always a good idea to make the connection and then to also keep in touch.
Okay.
But they might be, they might be somebody that's in a role that they're like, hey, like, I'm kind of happy here. It's okay. But I feel like maybe I'm not really growing. Or maybe, there's been a return to office and I really want to be like more remote than I am now. Or maybe it's vice versa. Like, I'm remote. I really miss people. I want to be back in the office. So it could be just kind of like a sort of germ of an idea of like, oh, I think I might want to start looking around out there. So we welcome working with people like that. Or it might be people that are just like, I need to get out. Like, I'm really miserable in my job. Like, I need, like, I'm very motivated to interview heavily and just to make the right move. Or, it's very common in this era right now is people that have been laid off. There's been a lot of like rifts and a lot of layoffs. And something that I want to say about that is that I think a lot of people are going through a real crisis of conscience around that, where they feel it's very tied into their self-worth. It's tied into their identity, right? Like, I think your job is, it's like half of your waking life oftentimes.
Yeah.
So I think people are feeling a real sense of like fear and directionlessness. And so I want to talk about that too. First of all, your job is not your identity and it's not your self-worth. There's fantastic people that have been laid off for a long time. So they could be in any sorts of those sorts of situations, right? when I will want to talk to them or be open to a conversation, what would be the best time is if I have an open role for them that I could fill now, because basically all of our energy is going into filling these roles for our clients. Our clients are our clients. They're the ones paying us. We need to make them happy. We want to do it quickly. We want to do it efficiently. We want to make sure that there's lots of care and feeding on that side. But we also do a lot of care and feeding on this side too, because we want this, we want the job seeker to feel heard and understood. I mean, we have to do that for our jobs. We have to understand what they do and what they want and what their dreams and ambitions are so we can make those correct matches.
Right.
So that's a little bit of a picture on the candidate side. So when we have a job open, that's when we'll talk to candidates that could be that fit or that potential fit. We'll talk and have a conversation about it. And then on the client side, I mean, that could be myriad reasons. It could be, maybe they don't know what they need to hire yet, but they want to talk to us and just kind of spitball with us about like, hey, like, this is where we are as a business. Like, what should we hire? Like, what's your recommendation? So it could be like really kind of a germ of an idea. It could be that they're looking for a specialist. So a lot of the times, like to be a recruiter in the design world, there's the extra kind of complexity of looking at not just the resume and the background, but also the portfolio, right? So me learning how to read a portfolio and how to interpret it took me years to do. And not every general recruiter will really know how to do design. So sometimes if the internal teams maybe are just like really thin, like they're just stretched really thin, or they don't have design as an expertise, then they might come to us. But oftentimes they'll come to us when they're like, hey, like we've tapped out our resources, like we have this open job that's been open for a while. We're not getting the kind of quality, like if we post something, like we're getting a barrage of resumes that are coming in, we can't separate the wheat from the chaff. Like we just want somebody to come in who knows the market, who knows how to drill down to like, what are the essentials of what this job is all about and what we need, and just give us like 4 to 6 great people that would do great. That was a very long-winded answer, but I hope that was helpful.
It's super helpful, and I think it's like a very valuable service. I can see why this would be very attractive for a client and a business who doesn't want to, sacrifice good people who are going to have to spend months combing through, like you said, hundreds of resumes and maybe thousands of resumes. And then obviously, we talked about the benefit for candidates. Speaking about candidates, I'd like to jump into the job market a little bit. So you mentioned layoffs, which we know that's a part of being a person on this hero's journey that is your job search. You have the ups, you have the downs. If you spend time on LinkedIn, you'll see people telling horror stories about, I've applied for so many jobs and, it's just you can't break through. And it sounds like it's a terrible job market, but there's always been difficulties in finding a job. Is it kind of the same as it ever was, or how would you describe the job market, particularly with the design candidates and clients that you're working with now?
Yeah. So the job market has been tough. I would say 2023 until now, it's been really scary for people. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think it's been really, it's been tough.
So you feel like that is actually the reality. It's not just of what people are saying, and you would know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to say, like, I never like to be pessimistic and like, oh, this is, the worst. I do think there's an advantage in being a job seeker in this market now, especially if you're coming in for the first time, because it's like learning how to drive stick, right? If you know how to drive stick, you can drive anything. Yeah. If you can come in this job market and you can find success and you can learn good habits about how to get in front of people and how to score that interview and how to do well during the interviews, like you're super far ahead. So in some ways, I think it's a blessing to come in during this time. Like when I started my business in 2007, it was right before the 2008 crash. So I had to learn really quickly some great habits about just like, plugging away, just remembering it's always darkest before the dawn, like I can do this, and just keeping the faith. So I think it's scary for a lot of people. I do think that it's starting to come back. Like we are seeing some signals, like little green shoots of things coming through. Like we're getting more inbound requests from clients, which is lovely. But I think what's been interesting is that because like the big FANGs or the MANGs, whatever we're calling them these days, they had tons of layoffs. These really big kind of stable companies had a lot of layoffs. And so I think it's really changed the candidate market just in terms of their perception of like, what is a safe company or what's a good company for me to join? Because I love startups. I love, all of our clients, but I come from the startup world myself from the late 90s in San Francisco. Like that's where I cut my teeth. That's where I learned the digital and tech world. And there's just like an exciting energy around that. Many candidates would say like, oh, I don't want to work at a startup. It feels like it's too unstable. I really want a stable job. But now I think that idea of what's stable is quite different, right? So it's like these big companies that people thought they had career kind of longevity there, like no questions asked. That's all been called into question now. So I think a combination of that, plus I think the combination of the pandemic hitting us in 2020 when the entire workforce went remote, I think that really opened up a lot of people's just hearts and minds, like, oh, it's like the record needle, like across, the needle across the record, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, we don't have to be in an office 5 days a week. And, oh, I can move to a different city, or I can move to the country, or like I think it really expanded people's consciousness in a way that made people just much more open to exploring different things and doing career transitions, or in Lois Barth's case, career translations.
Right.
Your guest from last week.
Good call out.
Yep. Hi, Lois.
Episode 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's an open-mindedness about what candidates will go for these days. But I think it's really important. And what I really like about JobQuest, to put a little plug in for you guys, is I love this idea of what I understand the tool does is that it scans your resume, it scans the job description and says, are you a good match for this role? Like you're 65% match, like maybe not the greatest match, but like you're 85 or above, like, okay, like maybe you could go for it.
Exactly.
Does that sound accurate?
We call that the job match score.
The job match score. I love the job match score. It's great. So I think it's really important because there is relatively a shortage of jobs and there is more candidates on the market than there have been in recent years, is to really make sure that you're going for the jobs that you're a good match for, right? Like I think there's definitely room in this conversation for like a career transition. Like I want to go for something different. I'm not saying that isn't on the table too, but I think it's really about like finding out like what's your niche, like what's your superpower, what's the thing that you have a lot of experience you could leverage. And I think there's a lot of, kind of that spraying and praying, like I'm out of a job or I want to find a new job and I'm going to feel productive by being behind my computer and sending my resume out to like 100 places to like an apply now button, which is basically in many ways going to a black hole because those people are overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's about being really niched. I think it's telling a great story about yourself that's memorable, short and sweet. I think it's about leveraging your personal connections. So I think there's things you can do to be smart in this market, but it's tough. And I think a lot of people are demoralized. I think a lot of people are scared and confused about what to do. So I'm really glad I'm on here so I can, hopefully shed a little light and empower people.
I'm also really glad that you're here to help alleviate people's fears because there's lots of anxiety about the job search. But one thing that makes people feel better, I think, is feeling like, okay, I'm not just a passive participant here, but I can do things. I can be active. And as we all know, one of the best things to do is to network. But again, there's a lot of anxiety about that. A lot of people don't know how to do it. They feel awkward. They feel artificial, whatever the case may be. How do you help people and what do you recommend people do when it comes to networking effectively? Yeah.
So I'd say in my role, we are basically the networkers for them, right? Like we're making the connections with companies and getting them introduced. I would say for people networking on their own, I know networking is such a scary word for a lot of people. I think it brings up a lot of anxiety. It brings up visions of being in a big room full of people and they all have name tags on. Everybody's talking to everybody else and where do I fit in? And I mean, I have that fear too. I don't actually love to go to networking events all the time, right? Sometimes I'm in the mood for it. Sometimes I'm just I just want to stay home and watch Dune and just, be on my couch. Right. I think there's in-person networking and then there's digital networking, right? And I think to get rid of the ick or the scary around the word networking, I think a great energy to bring to a networking situation, whether it's digital or in real life, is to think less about what am I going to get from this situation? How are people going to view me? To get stuck in that self-rumination and to bring more of an energy of what can I give? What can I give to the situation? right? I had an old vocal coach, Ellen Diamond, who taught me that too. Like, I'm a singer as well. I know that you're a musician as well.
Right.
But to go on stage, sometimes it's really scary. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. You're jumping into the void.
Yeah.
So she'd say, if you can go into any scary situation or a situation that makes you feel insecure, if you can go in with this, with the feeling of like, what can I give to the situation? If I'm scared of like being alone and stuck without a conversational partner, like, oh, I could go find someone who also looks kind of lost and alone and like be that conversational partner for them. I think being out there in the world is really important. I think the pandemic did this. I think also people that are coming up through the tech world are just more digital natives. So I think they're just very comfortable being behind a screen. But I think there's no substitute for us being in person together. Like, we are social beings. Like, we're animals, really. I mean, we're cave people that like to sit around a fire and tell stories. Like, I say that all the time, right?
For sure.
So we need that interpersonal connection. It builds trust. It's like just talking with you right now. It's like, looking at each other's like kind of micro expressions and like eye contact and all those things that just make you feel close to somebody, right?
Yeah, and if we were on a computer, we could still communicate, but you'd miss a lot of those little cues and the body language and just the kind of energy that's here in a room when you're together.
Exactly. Like, I didn't know how tall you were until I met you today.
For instance, my superpower. It's this hidden superpower. I'm very tall.
So I think. And this is something I hear from design leaders too, when they are meeting people that are more like mid-level, like 2 to 5 years in their career, or they say they feel really comfortable being behind a screen and taking orders and designing things.
Yeah.
But as far as like coming up with new ideas and collaborating and being in connection with people, that might be a weakness for some candidates in that area, or people that are employed. So I think just practicing, just like getting out there and practicing being with people is a great thing to do. Like, if it feels uncomfortable and weird at first, like, that's totally normal. Like, imposter syndrome, nervousness, like, everybody else is feeling that too.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking about you. They're thinking about their own stuff, right?
Right.
So I think just being in practice is good.
When a candidate has a conversation with you, that's kind of a networking conversation, because I'd imagine a lot of your screening, these 20,000 people in your database, is going to be what's on paper, and you're looking for that paper match. But then there's going to be a lot of similar candidates, so it's going to come down to actually getting to know this person, and they need to be able to represent themselves well to you and to explain what it is that they do and who they are and what they can bring to a company. So do you have any tips for candidates when they do have a conversation with a recruiter, and the recruiter's trying to find out like who is this person, and do I want to work with this person? Can I help this person? I just did a class with this design leader named Dave Hoffer out in Oakland, California, about portfolio, making your portfolio. So it's for designers, but some phrase that he bubbled up, which I really love, is it's the UX of you. UX is user experience, right? So that doesn't have to be so jargony. It's just like, if you're a candidate coming to me, like, my experience of you is every single touch point. Like, it is our conversation, to your point, right? Like, how can you come most prepared to that conversation? I'll be looking for, have you read the job description? Have you come prepared with stories and examples of things that you've done that are similar? Excitement about the role and about the company. Like, is this an area that I think would be a good match for you long term? And you're exhibiting signs of like being really engaged and interested. If a candidate is in it to win it, like, I'm going to be more in it to win it for them too, because there's nothing better than somebody who's just like, yes, gung ho, like, I'll write back, emails quickly. Like, if I ask for like additional samples, like, they'll get it that night. So it's just keeping that momentum going is really important. But it's all those like micro interactions too. So it's how is your resume findable? Does your resume have all the information on it that I need? Does your email and your signature have your name and your phone number? Like, are you easily reachable? If you're sending me a portfolio, are you making me ask you for the password? Oh my gosh, that's like so table stakes, but it happens all the time. So it's just like all these little things that people just might not be aware of. But all these things
the resume, the portfolio, how it's presented, what it looks like, how you're sending it to me, our conversation, what they're bringing to that conversation, the things they've done that are similar, like any metrics or successes, like people, like clients love numbers and metrics, increase engagement or, percentage of reduction of people falling off or whatever it might be. But then it's also like how you are with me after that process. Like, are you, as I was saying before, are you following up quickly? Are you kind of providing things that I'm asking for without needing a lot of back and forth? So it's kind of like the candidate can put themselves in my shoes and the client's shoes of like, how do we get the most information out of you with the least amount of clicks and the least amount of effort? That's going to really kind of give a positive impression.
It's kind of still that, and being in that giving mode of thinking, like putting themselves in your shoes. Like, I know you talk to a lot of people, you've got a lot of candidates you're talking to. So how can I make this actually easy for you so that you can more easily help me?
Yes. And if somebody asked me that in an interview, I would love that. Like, how can I help you?
Really?
Yeah, right. Because I think people, being a recruiter, I love it, but it's a little bit of it's a behind the scenes job. So when people like recognize what we're doing and they appreciate it and they want to help us in certain ways, like I love it when I reach out to a candidate who might not be the right fit for a role, but then they know somebody who would be great. And I don't think they're doing it for the referral bonus. Like maybe I might not have even mentioned the referral bonus to them, but they just want to help their friends or they just want to help the community in a bigger sense. And so I love it when people are just, what's going to make my job easier? It's getting the right candidates in front of me that I can then send to the client that are the right match. And so anytime that somebody can help me with that, they can, maybe they want to like repost my job that I post on LinkedIn to have it have more reach. Like things like that are just like a thank you note after I screen them or after after I see them out, or just to keep that warm connection going. We talked about in-person networking, but the digital networking, like that keeping in touch, just being strategic about how you're communicating with me. Keeping your communication really short and sweet is really important. If I see somebody who's writing a whole wall of text about why they're a great match for the role, I'm thinking one of two things, if not both things. I'm thinking like, oh, this person's going to need a lot of hand-holding. They're going to need a lot of time. And I completely admit that I can be long-winded too, so it's something I'm constantly working on as well. I might assume they're trying to like talk their way into the job. They can't really do the job. It's a bit of a stretch, and so they're just like, here's all the things that I can do that are similar, but it usually means the candidate's not the right fit.
Too much explanation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just, short and sweet. Oh, another networking thing I definitely want to tell people is if you know someone that knows me, especially if you've gotten like a warm introduction, like, hey, so-and-so, Jane Doe told me to get in touch with you. Put that Jane Doe's name in the subject line, like so-and-so referred me, because those warm connections, especially in this market when there's so many candidates, like that social proof is so important. Yeah. Right? So it's like if you're coming through somebody that I know, or even if you're like, hey, I see that we're both connected to so-and-so on LinkedIn, great, that's a social proof connection. And it also makes me think like, oh, this person's a savvy networker. I want to get behind them. Like they know what's what. So they're going to be easier to rep and just like a more fruitful relationship.
In fact, that's how we got connected, was through Nick Gould, who was a mutual connection.
Right.
And he was the second guest on the podcast and had so many great insights. Yeah. Nick's amazing. Yeah. But he put us in touch, and it's just, I mean, if I had just reached out to you cold, maybe we would have still had a conversation, but it was just obviously facilitated because Nick said, hey, you both should talk.
Absolutely.
So that's there's no replacement for that.
And also, so even prior to that, so yes, all of that is true. And then prior to that, just having things live in language. Like I was telling Nick, like, oh, hey, I'd like to do more like podcasts. I'm doing a live stream every other week with two other design recruiter friends, Jared Treadley and Erica Fortgang. And that was me talking to a recruiter that knew both of them. And I was like, oh, I'd like to do more things. I'd like to be more public and kind of get out from behind my computer. And so she's like, oh, you should talk to Jared. He's doing that already. Like you guys could, do something together. So it was really me talking to Nick and saying like, hey, like I'm really loving doing this live stream. I'd love to do more things like that. And so when he met with you, he was like, oh, I have Joanne in mind because she already planted the seed with me, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, then I had asked him, do you have anybody that you can recommend? And
Yeah.
since you had already mentioned it. So sometimes you have to put that out there in the world. You have to ask people,
Absolutely.
tell people what you want, and then it happens.
It's so powerful, right?
Yeah.
I think it's powerful from the person, like, to understand what it is you're looking for, and they can think of you when things come up. But I also think it's just powerful just for yourself to say, like, what you're up to. It's just you can remind yourself, like, what is my goal? Like, what is it that I'm really excited about? I think there's real power in just, if you want to get metaphysical, I mean, you can take the girl out of California. You can't take the California out of the girl. You could say, like, oh, there's this energy connection. I do believe in that. I've seen that a lot. But even if if you don't believe in that and you're just like, I just want to remember, like, who I am and what I'm up to, I think there's a real power in just speaking about it, sharing it with people, sharing that, making that connection with people. I think it's magic.
I think it's undeniable. We have an example right here. I mean, you spoke it, I spoke it, Nick connected. So,
totally.
Within the client's companies, who at that company are you typically working with? Is it HR? Is it the CEO? I mean, with a startup, it's probably the CEO. But like, who within companies do you typically liaise with?
Yeah. So to your point, if it's a small company, it might be the founder or the CEO. If it's a bigger company, it'll probably either be somebody from TA, so talent acquisition, reaching out to us or HR, or it could be somebody who's in charge of design, so maybe a VP of design, a head of design. It could be a recruiter, so it doesn't have to be like the head of TA. It could be an actual recruiter. Or it could be like the head of product, because we work on product and design, and oftentimes product and design will roll up into product as the ultimate leadership arena. So it could be somebody like that too.
Should we go to your final tip for job seekers?
Sure.
All right. So what is Joanne Weaver's number one tip for job seekers here in the job market today?
So it's to get outside. It's to get outside. Get off of your computer. Get up away from your desk, go out there, meet live people, go to events. Doesn't have to even be professional networking events. It could just be like things that you enjoy doing. Just get out there with people. Like be a people person. Even if you don't self-identify as an extrovert or a people person, there's just so much value in connecting with people, and of course having your wants and your desires live in language. You never know where a connection's going to come from. And I think just also being really targeted in your approach, to not just feel productive because you're putting out so many resumes. Really make it a personalized approach. Really, it's much better to focus on maybe 20 companies than 100 companies, but put a lot of time and energy and thought into those 20 companies. Research them. Who do you know? If you know people that work at those companies or know people that work at those companies, have a little blurb, have something you can send them. Make it easy for people to like send you along and to recommend you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where can people go to learn more about Joanne Weaver and Joanne Weaver Group?
They can go to my LinkedIn on Joanne Weaver, my name. They can go to JoanneWeaverGroup.com. It's JoanneWeaver, V as in Victor, ER, group.com. We are redesigning our website. It's pretty old. It's the cobbler's children has no shoes situation right now. But we're in the midst of a redesign, which is exciting, and a rename.
I heard you know some designers, so you can probably
we know some designers.
Find some help there.
It's incredibly I can't believe how tough it's been to find. It's kind of a different type of design than we do, but yes, it's been a journey. It's been a journey. And they can also catch me and Jared and Erica's podcast, our live stream that we do on LinkedIn. It's every other Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. They can follow Design Unfiltered. So hashtag Design Unfiltered on LinkedIn. And you'll get served up when we're going to do it next. And we're going to have Nick Gould on, actually. We're going to have Nick Gould on Wednesday, February 19th at 1 o'clock.
Oh, very good.
LinkedIn.
Is that on YouTube as well?
It is. We have our archives on YouTube. It's not where most people see it. So it's more of like a LinkedIn thing. So it's a live stream. So you can actually come, join, ask questions in real time, network with the community. So we just kind of, it's kind of off the cuff. We take questions as they come in. Cool. We have great guests that come on. Nick's going to be amazing. And yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, Joanne Weaver, thank you so much for spending time and sharing your insights. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much, Ryan. It's been really fun.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.